was with the other. It had happened so fast. Too fast. Before Conall had even drawn his sword, his father was on the ground beside him, mortally wounded, and Arthur Munro was telling him, "Always, our faithfulness belongs to Edward." Munro had stepped on Douglas MacGregor's chest, using his booted foot as leverage to remove the sword. Munro had turned to engage a MacGregor soldier, giving John Cardmore the chance to pull Conall out of harm's reach. Conall now stumbled across the black hills as they moved deeper into the thick trees. He thought of all those MacGregor souls lost this night. "Where do we go?" he asked again, needing the answer now. "We must find survivors. Call in armies loyal to—" Suddenly, John Cardmore towered in front of him in the darkness, so close that Conall could see the hate that lit his eyes, turning the blue to black. He could smell something primal and resolute about the larger man. "I saw your mum die, and now you're da," John Cardmore said, his voice scratchy and fierce. "I've buried my beautiful Belle and 3 sons in the last 5 years. All gone." He grabbed Conall up by the leather of his tunic and said, heat and spittle chasing his words, "Aye, and now we're done with death. I'll bear it no more, d'ye hear? You'll get your retribution, 'cause that's what's owed ye. But first I'll be keeping my pledge to your mother, and you can seek your vengeance when I'm gone." Chapter 1. Scotland, 1304. Tess Munro stared steadily into the pale grey eyes of the man she would very soon vow to honour and love above all others. She searched deeply, reaching into his soul, she was sure, and waited, with the greatest of hopes, and saw nothing. Nothing that inspired or impassioned her, nothing to hold her interest nor warm her heart. Nice eyes they were, but blank. No, not blank. Detached, lacking any promise. Alan Sinclair possessed nothing at all that would have ever inspired her to choose him as her mate. He was, however, hers, or soon would be, if her father had anything to say about it. Alan Sinclair was her father's current pet. His rapid rise up the ranks from page to knight did much to recommend Sinclair to her father, and it didn't hurt that he was second son to the Earl of Caithness. Tess found herself intrigued now only by his willingness to meet with her today. Surprised, too, for they were only recently betrothed, and there were few who would dare to risk the wrath of her sire, Sir Arthur Munro. This she had learned rather quickly. Truth be known, Tess Munro could hardly claim to know much else about her own sire. She'd spent the majority of her life in England, where her mother had been exiled as punishment for failing to produce a male heir. Set aside, as if only a pair of worn riding gloves for which you no longer had any use. When her dear mother had passed away last year, Tess had been summoned to Scotland. What little her mother had ever said about her father and his severity during their short marriage had left Tess only with an impression of a cruel and imposing figure. Thus, when she'd been reunited with her sire after nearly 7 years apart, the meeting had been coldly civil, and she knew that her mother had not exaggerated his unkindness. Any fanciful notion she'd had of a warm and loving welcome had been just that, no more than wishful thinking. She was to serve a purpose, that was all. "Families and fortunes and castles and coin," her mother had answered dully when Tess had, many years ago, asked, "Why did you marry father if you felt no love for him?" Tess knew now that her years at the nunnery, where her father had discarded his wife and daughter so that he might pursue another, younger and hopefully more fertile wife, while idyllic, had not properly prepared her for life outside those cloistered and happy walls. Marfield was not a happy place. Her home of the past year was cold and stark and unfriendly, exactly like her father. This, then, had